President Cyril Ramaphosa is making his way to Ukraine, where he will hold talks with President Volodymyr Zelensky. Ramaphosa is part of an African Union delegation, which includes the leaders of Egypt, Congo, Brazzaville, Uganda, Senegal and Zambia. After meeting President Zelensky, the group will travel to the Kremlin for talks with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. This as the two neighboring countries fight in a war that has gone on for over a year. Ramaphosa's first stop was in Poland earlier today. For more on this conversation, we're now joined by Professor Christopher Isike of the University of Pretoria's African Center for the Study of the United States. Professor, appreciate your time this evening. Can you provide us with an overview of President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to Ukraine and his purpose in holding talks with Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin?
Thank you very much, Hugo, for having me. This is a welcome initiative, and it's consistent with South Africa's foreign policy of Ubuntu, that is committed to the establishment of a mutually beneficial international system, that helps to achieve national development priorities of the continent and its partners. So South Africa has consistently maintained that it is committed in line with its foreign policy values, committed to peaceful resolution of conflicts through the use of mediation. So it favors negotiation and inclusivity, and opposes war, as was said by Sidney Mufamadi in his briefing. So this is a welcome development, and the mission, as you said, is for the African delegation led by President Ramaphosa to mediate the conflict, meet with President Zelensky tomorrow, and then on Saturday to see President Putin, after which they would deliberate and come out with a peace plan that would hopefully help to resolve the current war in Ukraine.
So we know for a fact that the West has failed to reach. In fact, the West is largely advocating for war, whereas Africa, on the other hand, I suppose, would be the only ones that are looking for peace. Now, what we've also picked up is that Russia is particularly friendly with many African countries. Is this likely to yield some success when those conversations are had over the next couple of days?
Yes, it can. It can yield some success. The only problem there is that it is one because of the vested interest of the different parties. Russia on the one side, the United States and its EU allies on the other. There would have to also be a meeting of minds by all these international stakeholders in the conflict. So even if Africa comes out with a peace plan that would, for example, attempt to persuade Ukraine to cede some of its territories, including the ones in the east that Russia has occupied since 2014, Ukraine has maintained that they would not want to do that. If they would be persuaded, it will be something that they will have to take the West, the United States, particularly into confidence in, because the United States have been a part of this war in terms of the kind of military support that it has given them. So it is not a decision that only Ukraine can take. So while a peace plan is possible, Ukraine's acceptance will be dependent on other actors in the conflict. Even if Ukraine was to agree to some kind of concession, it will also have to align with what Russia wants. And given its current belligerent posture, that is something that would have to be looked at carefully. Now, the problem with all of this also is that South Africa had not played what you call come to equity with clean hands, if you like, because if from the beginning it had acted according to its foreign policy principles, it would have been in a better position, both in terms of soft power, leverage and confidence, to be able to mediate in a manner that would be accepted by all as neutral. Unfortunately, its neutrality is in doubt by the West, and so we take any kind of South African leadership of a peace initiative with a pinch of salt, given its alleged romance, if you like, with Russia. So those are some of the challenges.
But Professor, surely if South Africa is biased, or their relationship with Russia is tainted because they have a closer relationship with Russia than they profess, then wouldn't this work in the favor of peace, is the first part of the question. And my second part, if you'll allow me, is we have Egypt, Congo, Brazzaville, Uganda, Senegal, and Zambia as part of this delegation. Speak to us about the significance of these particular countries and their heads of state accompanying President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Okay, so to your first point, you are correct that the relationship, the special relationship, if you like, between Russia and South Africa can be an advantage. And I've said severally that this is one of the considerations for why Washington has not come out really hard on South Africa, because they believe that South Africa has a pathway, to peaceful resolution of the conflict. So you are correct that can be exploited, so long as South Africa is bold and clear enough in what it wants to do and is able to resist any overtures by Russia, which will seek to exploit that special relationship for Russia to benefit at the expense of Ukraine. So a bit of fair-handedness by South Africa can turn that relationship into an advantage, like you said. On your second question, look, it's a mixed match here, because some of the countries you've mentioned, like Egypt, for example, I think like Zambia, have voted to condemn Russia. So you would want to think that Russia may not see them as friendly, mediators, if you understand what I mean. They would not be perceived as neutral. But having said that, another challenge, in my view, is the fact that the president of Comoros, I think Uganda, and one other, Republic of Congo, pulled out last minute, and sent representatives instead of they themselves as president going with Ramaphosa as originally planned. They tried to convince Ramaphosa that Ukraine's incursion or counter-offensive against Russia may make the whole place, the whole region, ungovernable and unsafe. But South Africa rebuffed that and has, gone ahead with the president of Zambia and Senegal. And hopefully, so that is a bit of a challenge, but I'm hoping that at least in line with the African Union's, commitment to a peaceful resolution of conflict and a more inclusive world, we hope that this can be something that can, help, especially if they can convince both sides to give some concessions.
So we've talked about the 6 leaders going to Russia. And going to Ukraine, having a conversation with the 2 leaders, obviously establishing what the 2 leaders are prepared to give or take. Now, what we know for a fact is that Vladimir Putin is a shrewd man. Is he likely to make any demands on the African leaders in as far as his relationship, whether it's trade or otherwise, goes with these countries? Because we do know that his foreign minister has been courting a number of African countries over the last few months.
Well, yeah, he's very likely to do that. Like you said, he's a very shrewd man. He knows what he's doing. We should not also forget the fact that he doesn't have much respect for Africa and its leaders. So he would want to, squeeze out as much advantage for Russia as he can get. And those are possible trade-offs that can happen. Because, again, while in Africa we are wont to saying that this is Europe's war, and it doesn't concern us, and people have criticized this whole trip for the fact that we have conflict in the continent which the African Union has not been able to resolve, and here we are going to resolve a conflict in Europe. Well, the thing is that this is a conflict that now affects us as much as it affects Europe. For one, we can talk about the economic effects of the crisis in terms of food shortages that it has caused. This conflict has driven the price of wheat, which is a staple food across the continent, up by over 60%, due to shortages, right? And together, both Russia and Ukraine produce and exported wheat to several countries and are responsible for about 44% of Africa's wheat consumption between 2018 and 2020. So this alone has really affected Africa. So it is something that is now almost like an existential threat to us. So it's the right thing to do. We will just have to decide what kind of concessions, what kind of losses we will incur as a result of being peacemakers.
Final thoughts on this, Professor. You mentioned a moment ago that Vladimir Putin has little respect for Africa. It almost sounds ironic when he's invited, or at least accepted, the proposal by the 6 leaders to try and reach some form of peace deal. That, for me, doesn't make too much sense. Enlighten us on why you think so.
Well, my statement was based on how he has in the past regarded, African leaders' statements he has made about the continent, not very complimentary like Donald Trump. But he's a shrewd man, like you said. He would always seek to get any advantage, leverage on any advantage that he can get. The idea of listening to African leaders is not an indicator of respect for the continent. It's part of the whole geopolitical rivalry between China, Russia, and the US that is playing right now in the continent. Each of these powers are competing for Africa's resources. They understand Africa's strategic role, so they are all cutting Africa. This is part of that long-term goal to cut Africa, and the goal always is to force their interests on the continent, and this is why we as Africans and our leaders must be very, very considerate and circumspect in the engagements that we do. We must ensure that we invest in knowledge creation in the continent about these superpowers in order to foster knowledge-driven engagement between them. We know little or nothing about these powers. They always have policies towards us. Very soon in July, we'll talk about the Russia-Africa Summit. We've had the US-Africa Summit. There's the China-Africa Summit. Nobody talks about an Africa-Russia, Africa-China, or Africa-USA summit. So these are the kind of things that must begin to happen so that when we engage from a position of knowledge that will give us leverage in terms of the kind of things we want to achieve.
Professor Isike, appreciate your views as always on Africa Today. That was Professor Isike of the University of Pretoria's African Center for the Study of the United States.